Okay, Shvur Tov. So the poem we're going to do this morning has a bit of a controversy behind it. For me, this poem is most famous because we recite it Friday night as part of Kabbalat Shabbat, and we're going to talk about that a lot in a few minutes. For a lot of other shul goers, it's the psalm that we say when we put the Sefer Torah away Shabbos morning. However, it seems like the origin of the poem had to do with weather and had to do with, let me turn my phone off, that was bad. Had to do with weather and natural disasters. Now, what I want to say about that is that there was a custom to recite this poem during Sukkot. So some people felt that the recitation of this poem during Sukkot, some people said Sukkot, some people did it on Shmini Atzeret as the psalm for the day. And Shmini Atzeret, of course, is the day. Oh, did you get a sheet? They're right here. They're right here. Sorry. Shmini Atzeret, of course, is the day that we say Tefillat Geshem. So, I wanted to get into the Psalms of Shabbat anyways, but part of me wanted to take a look at a poem that had to do with weather because this week, of course, is Tu B'Shvat. Now, the controversy about this poem was it based on some earlier pagan poem that was also a prayer about the God, for them, the gods of nature. For us, of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, and nature. I don't know, but that possibility has been mentioned. There's another idea that we'll mention later. I don't know if we'll get to it today. That it may have been written by King David because there was a terrible natural disaster, earthquake, maybe, mountain slides, rock slides, things of that nature in Lebanon and Syria. And it didn't affect Eretz Yisrael. And this was a thank you to Hashem. That Hashem has all this power, but he didn't use it against us. And that therefore we should feel a certain amount of joy in that. That's also a possibility. But let me say something about the poem and weather, and perhaps asking for God to control weather on our behalf, as an introduction to say just 2 or 3 sentences about Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is a fascinating holiday that is sort of like a cat. It's got 9 lives. It originally was just a technical date for agricultural bookkeeping. It was a date that was chosen by the rabbis for when you would do your cheshbon, your accounting of your tithing on fruit, on pre-eights, on things from that's all. It was just an accounting date and had very little significance. That only changed in the 1500s. And we're going to talk a lot today about those great rabbis from the 1500s, the Ari in the lead, because they loved the poem we're going to take a look at in a second. In the 1500s, they decided that Tu B'Shvat had certain mystical significance, and specifically fruit, each kind of fruit, whether it had no shell or a hard shell, each one of those kinds of fruit had mystical importance and was supposed to teach us ideas about the world. And they're the ones that made up this concept of a Tu B'Shvat Seder. The first Tu B'Shvat Seder was printed at the end of the 16th century, and it was totally based on writings of the Ari. Now, at the time of Shabtai Tzvi, when the Shabtai Tzvi proclaimed himself to be Mashiach and gave all sorts of mystical reasons why he was Mashiach, So now we're talking 1666. At that point, when he converted to Islam and repudiated Judaism, and hundreds, literally hundreds of thousands of Jews went into despair, many of the rabbis, especially in Germany, said, let's have nothing to do with Kabbalah. And one of the things that they banned was the Tu B'Shvat Seder. They put a cherem on our Tu B'Shvat Seder that many of us do today anyways. As time went on, we became, especially through the Hasidim in the 18th century into the 19th century, we became more attuned to Kabbalah again. So that was the second incarnation of Tu B'Shvat. In 1907, and I apologize, I should have looked up his name. There was a teacher from Zichron Yaakov. I apologize. I really should have checked before I said this. Who took his students to plant trees, and it was only a couple of years ago, a couple of years after that the JNF adopted the holiday as a holiday having to do with trees and Eretz Yisrael and Zionism, and it became a very big Zionist holiday. And for many of us, that's what we remember growing up. In my Hebrew school, I went to an afternoon Hebrew school in the 50s, and we used to bring a dime every Sunday morning, and you'd get a leaf on a chart. And then sometime in, November, December, you would send those charts to the JNF, and in time for Tu B'Shvat, you'd get back, for $1, you got back a certificate that a tree was planted in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, and I was like, wow, very exciting. That was the good part. The bad part was that they fed you Boxer. That was the bad part. Okay. Oh man, I think they had a deal with the dentists. Break your teeth on this. This was true until 1978. I mean, it's still true today. But in 1978, Haaretz, now I don't know who it was that motivated them to do it, but in 1978, Haaretz came out with a modern Tu B'Shvat Seder, which was all about ecology. And for the last 30 years, 40 years, the Tu B'Shvat has been about ecology as well. It's sort of like our Earth Day. And as many schools that go out to plant trees on Tu B'Shvat today, a similar number go out and collect garbage on beaches and parks. And all of these ideas are beautiful. And I'm not preaching one over another, but it's really nice. And there is a Hasidic minhag based upon the Ari that on Tu B'Shvat you should try to eat 15 different fruits. 15 different fruits. Okay. I don't know, just a little bit. But it's a nice day. And I remember, when I lived in Eretz Yisrael in the 80s and 90s with my kids, we used to go plant trees. And after a while, and then later we'd go look at where the tree was, and it always died. So my kids used to say, "Oh, Abba, it's the annual tree killing ceremony." But the idea was still very, very beautiful. That to go out and feel another way of feeling connected to Eretz Yisrael. What can be bad about that? So this poem is about our connection to the nature of Eretz Yisrael and anything. So I just wanted to get in that idea. But now I'm going to tell you to ignore all that. And forget about the fact that we say this poem on Sukkot, and it has to do with rain and weather and all of that. Again, the Ari invented Kabbalat Shabbat. The Ari lived his last 2 years of his life in Tzfat. In 1570, he went to Tzfat for medical reasons. His doctors told him he had probably emphysema, but it's not so clear. He had a lung problem. They said the ear is clearer So he went from Yerushalayim to Tzfat in 1570. He dies in 1572. But while he was there, there's so many things that he did. And one of the things they did was invent Kabbalat Shabbat. And there's a fascinating thing about the poems, the Psalms, that he chose for Kabbalat Shabbat. Before the Ari, Kabbalat Shabbat was apparently just the recitation of the Shir Shel Yom for Shabbat. Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat. That was it. That was it. And of course, the Ari added the poem written by one of his compatriots, Lecha Dodi, which was written, also by Rav Shlomo Alkabetz in Tzfat, a little bit earlier than the Ari got there. But listen what happened. The Ari said there should be a psalm for each day of the week, then Lecha Dodi, then the psalm for Shabbat. Okay? And that's what we have. That's what we have. The psalm for Shabbat is psalm number 92. So we have 92, and then we read the psalm for Friday. In a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about why. Because what we're going to do after this is the psalm for Shabbat. And then we'll talk about why we also have the psalm for Friday right after it, which is 93. Then you go to L'chun Ranana, that's 95. Then we recite 96, then 97, then 98, then 99. The one that's out of place is 29. So you go 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 29. But the Ari decided that this poem really belongs there as the last of the Psalms talking about the weekdays and getting us ready for the poem, song, hymn, Lecha Dodi, which is bringing us into greeting Shabbat. So we have to look at this poem and see what is there about this poem that convinced the Ari HaKadosh that we should be reciting this as our welcome to Shabbat. Okay, I'm going to do something. I really feel bad about this. Okay, really we should learn the poem first, but I just want to answer that question first. So we're going to look at some of the Kabbalah in the poem before we look at the pshat in the poem, which is wrong educationally, but forgive me. If you notice, looking at the poem, I emboldened every time it says Shem Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Do you notice that? So if you count them, anyone know how many there are? Double that, 18. There are 18. Shem Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei is in the poem 18 times. The Ari said that makes this the poem that the rabbis used to decide that there should be 18 blessings in the weekday Amidah. Keep counting. There's 8. There are. Believe me, there's 18. The Ari went on to say, when you have 18 Yud Kei Vav Kei, well, there's 4 letters in Yud Kei Vav Kei. So 4 times 18 gives you 72. So reciting God's name 18 times is like reciting the mystical 72-letter name of God with which historically we say Kabbalists performed miracles. We don't know what that 72-letter name, well, there are opinions, but we don't know for sure what that 72-letter name is. But that's supposedly Shem HaMeforash that has all sorts of mystical powers. So reciting it with the right kavanot, with the right intention, is supposed to enable us to feel really spiritual, close to Hashem, and that's a preparation for Shabbat. That's a preparation for Shabbat, that we feel closer to heaven, as we're going to see in one more minute. Also underlined in the middle section, from verses Gimel through Tet, 3 through 9, is the word kol 7 times. So the Ari says, well, that's why we have 7 brachot in the Amidah of Shabbat, because it's the 7 voices that Hashem has used. Now, these 7 voices, there are many explanations for why the 7 voices. And when we look at them, we're going to give some more. But just when looking at it from the outside, before we go inside, the 7 voices, according to the Ari HaKadosh, represent the 7 midot of the great leaders of Israel that we're supposed to emulate and adopt, which are, of course, chesed, kindness, gevura, strength or power, tiferet, splendor or synthesis, netzach, eternity, hod, majesty, yesod, foundation, and malchut, kingship, royalty. So those 7. However, in Jewish mysticism, there are 3 more sfirot that aren't of this world. The other 3 sfirot that aren't of this world, you all know them, even though you don't really think of them as sfirot sometimes, are chachma, wisdom, bina, understanding, da'at, knowledge or experience. So according to the Ari, in the first 2 verses of introduction to our poem, we have the word havu 3 times. And according to the Ari, those 3 havus are the three cognitive sfirot which are in heaven. So reciting the poem correctly connects us to the sfirot of Shemayim. And although we all sing it, I mean, like almost every show in the world today sings this poem Friday night, the Ari says you're supposed to recite it slowly with kavana atzuma, with very powerful devotion. We sing it. Okay, nothing wrong. Okay. But anyways, now we're going to start the poem, but that's like the background of the poem, please.
Just one question.
Sure.
The parak itself was written either by David Amel.
We believe by David Amel, correct.
2,000 years or 1,500 years later, the Ari came along.
Oh, more. Now that he's
read into it.
Correct.
He read all this into something that been lying around for 1,000 years.
Okay. You're asking a very good question.
I like to think so.
Okay. I'm not going to give you, excuse me, if this were like a history course, I'd give you a much better answer. I'm going to give you a very shorthand answer. The power of the Ari came from the fact that he had announced that he was the reincarnation of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, the Rabbi, on Lag BaOmer, which is the yortzeit of the Rashbi, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. He went with his students to Meron, to the grave of the Rashbi, and he went into a trance. And during the trance, he spoke to them in another voice, which when he woke up told them was the voice of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, because he was the reincarnation of the Rashbi. The Rashbi was the reincarnation of previous generations. So the Ari would say to you, ye of little faith. No, he wouldn't say that. He would say to you, I can do this. I can tell you what the real meaning of it was, because really I'm connected all the way back. I'm connected all the way back to when all of this stuff was written. I was there. It's a fascinating idea, but that I think is hard to take literally. I think you have to take it much metaphorically, that he really felt he was connected on a spiritual wavelength. But that's what he claimed. And his students, and many of his followers, accepted that. So that he was speaking from a position of authority, rather than just saying, isn't this a fascinating way of looking at it? Okay, let's finally, oh my God. We have sheets right over here. Let's finally, I can't believe this, I apologize. But we can finish this week and next. Okay, let's actually start taking a look at the poem. And begins Mizmor LeDavid. And again, Mizmor LeDavid means that a Kadosh Baruch Hu, there's LeDavid Mizmor and Mizmor David. This means a Kadosh Baruch Hu inspired King David to write this. Okay, that's the superscript. But now what the poem actually begins, Havu Lashem B'nei Elim. So Havu, according to most commentaries, means to give. Now I'm looking at Dr. Alter. He says grant to the Lord. I looked at one of the Koran translations that said render to the Lord. What translation? Ascribe. Ascribe. Okay, render, ascribe, grant, give. Fancy words for giving, right? So give to Hashem. That doesn't say what you're supposed to give yet. First, it tells us who is supposed to be giving it. And here is one of the major arguments about the poem. Who are the B'nai Elim? And there are three opinions. There's the opinion of the historians that say that King David was referencing the powers that he ascribes to God, but it meant the powers that the Goyim, of their Avodah Zarah, ascribed to their gods. Okay? We don't like that shot too much, okay? Because it sounds like we're too close to Avodah Zarah. Most of the Meforshim, who try to be literal, say he's asking the angels, B'nai Elim are the Malachim. He's asking the angels to participate in this giving of something, we'll see in a second what it is, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu Hashem, okay? That's not what the Ari and the mystical interpreters say. I don't know. It seems to me that the mystical interpreters would have said it's angels. But the mystical interpretation said, B'nai Elim are us. And the Elim, the powerful ones, which is the best translation for that term, I have sons of God for B'nai Elim. I like better the sons of the powerful ones. The Aleph Lamed Hey root means power, which is why it is a generic term for God. But the word really means power. According to the Ari, the powerful ones are Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And again, that fits in with we're talking about the Sfirot. And according to the Ari, there are references to all 7 of the shepherds, Ushpizin, in the poem, because all of them are contributing to the ideas of it. So the Havul Hashem B'nai Elim, that's us, that's Jews. Those are the descendants of the powerful ones, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Now we see what we're supposed to give to Hashem. Havul Hashem Kavod Va'oz. We're supposed to grant to Hashem, render to Hashem, or even ascribe to Hashem, Kavod, glory, and Oz, power. Very, very fierce power. So Hashem has those 2 aspects of it. It's, one is like, I guess it's 2 different kinds of wow. One wow is the beauty and glory. The other wow is the power, okay? Now, the power is the big deal in this poem, as we're going to see in just a couple of minutes. We will get to the beginning of the middle part. This poem is about tremendous power, tremendous power and control over nature. And we'll see that right away once we get to Gimel and Dalet. But we're not done with the introduction. Havu Hashem kavod shemo. When we grant to Hashem, or we render to Hashem, or we recognize within Hashem that great glory and that great power, what we're really seeing is the glory of God's name. Now this fits in so perfectly with the Ari. that we're glorifying the name of Hashem. Now, it also fits into the poem because we're saying Hashem's name 18 times, right? But it fits into the idea of the Ari that it's all about, mentioning God's name. That it's like we're connecting into God's power by utilizing God's name, saying it 18 times, the 72 letters. By the way, in the poem, there are 91 words. So the Ari also says the number 91 is when you add the word Adonai to the name Havaya, the four-letter name of Hashem, it comes out to 91. So in other words, the poem is all about the name of God. So it works out. Havud Lashem Kavod Shemo. We're recognizing and granting and rendering and really accepting upon ourselves this concept of the name of Hashem alone. Just the name of Hashem carries great, great power. Now, what do we mean by the name of Hashem? I think Pshat obviously is Yud Kei Vav Kei, the four-letter name we never pronounce. But the Ari would say the name means, the more mystical versions of the name that we don't even know, And the end of the introduction is Hishtachavu LaHashem Behadrat Kodesh. Prostrate yourself, bow down to Hashem, okay, in his holy majesty, in his holy, again, you could translate glory. What do you have? I'm sorry? Splendor? Splendor. Okay. I guess the translators want a diet. Okay. So in other words, we begin the poem by saying, we're going to talk about Hashem. But the purpose of talking about Hashem is to recognize the amazing power and glory of Hashem. This is all done in a way of avodah, of divine service to Hashem and to Hashem's name. Okay? That's what we're saying in the introduction. Now, next week, we'll have to compare that to what we say in the last two verses, which is, the sort of the wrap-up, which is a little bit different. But we'll see we're going to see they're fitting bookends for the 7 verses in the middle. Okay, and now let's begin the material in the middle. Kol Hashem al Hamayim. The voice of God is over the waters. Now, what might that mean?
God controls.
Right, God is the God of the waters. Now, there are commentaries. Okay, wait 1 second. Good, thank you. There are commentaries. Do you want a copy of the sheet? Should have left them in the back, not the front. I'm sorry. Okay, no, you're welcome. Good morning. There are some that want to say that the 7 coals are the 7 days of creation. And this is God's voice over the Tehom at the beginning of creation, over the deep, over the waters. Okay, it's hard to get them to line them all up. But there are others that say, no, the 7 coals can be connected to events in Jewish history. And that the first one, or the first 2, is talking about Yam Suf. It's talking about the splitting of the sea. Okay? So, but again, look, the sea is very scary. I mean, and we want a bracha for those people that, that go out to sea. It's very, very scary. It's not scary if you don't leave sight of land, but once you leave sight of land, it's very, very scary. So in other words, but God's voice is there too. We're still in control of Hashem. And of course, that's the story from Yonah, right? That Yonah thought he could somehow flee from Hashem by leaving Eretz Yisrael. But Hashem is on the open seas as well, and we need Hashem's help everywhere. Please.
You said it was about the weather. So
you
could also read it that he controls the rain.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, 100%. And that idea is going to be even more emphasized in the second line. Kel hakavod hirim. The God of glory makes thunderous noise. Ra'am. Ra'am. Right? It's like thunder. Ra'am can also be Re'idat Adama, can also be earthquakes. And so there are the commentaries that talk about this is a reference to a historical event in the time of David where there was a massive earthquake. We know Eretz Yisrael is on a fault line, and that there are throughout history, many earthquakes that have taken place here in Eretz Yisrael. In Yerushalayim, the most famous ones are in Tzfat. Okay, but according to we'll see. We'll talk more about that probably next week. But again, Hirim is the thunder and the lightning. And those of you that know about Tama 38, right? Tama 38, where that they'll fix up houses. Theoretically, it's not just so that the builders will make money. It's so that the houses will be made secure for earthquake. Please.
I just want to know why you didn't tell me this before I bought my new set of dishes.
Oh, yeah. Put them in a stable place. Yeah. There actually was a minor earthquake in the south of Israel last year, and they said the one thing that happened was that like China fell out of closets and things. Keep them stable. Okay, so El hakavod hirim Hashem almayim rabim. God is over the many waters. God, this is part of a number of ideas, which is God is everywhere. God is everywhere, because if you asked, ancient man, the seas surrounded the entirety of the world. So over the many waters means that God surrounds and is everywhere. Okay. In later times, you could say Mayim Rabim, the many waters, could be like the seven seas or something of that nature. But that God is all over the oceans, which we think of as so powerful, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu controls those. Just before we go on to Dalit, you notice in the second line of Gimel, it says, Kel HaKavod. That's a 19th mention of God's name. Okay, all the other mentions of God's name in the poem are Yud Kei Vav Kei. This one, Aleph Lamed, again, according to the Ari, it was because King David put this name of Hashem here in the poem too, that Chazal felt they had the right to add a 19th blessing to Shmona Esrei. According to the Ari, this is what gave the rabbis permission to add the 13 Ulam al Shanim. We have, in the middle of Shemona Esrei, we have 12 positive requests from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then around the year 100 of the Common Era, we added a negative request. Please, could you get rid of these bad guys? Who were the bad guys?
The medium.
Yeah, who were the medium? What do we call them? Christians, yeah, we call them Christians. That's a blessing against the Christians, yeah. So that's why in countries of Europe, they changed it from minim to malshinim, because some of the Christians were getting it. So we were a little scary. But anyways, we got permission for putting in this one negative blessing that we needed to save us from the threats of the early Christians, because it says Kel here. Okay, Dalit. Kol Hashem b'koach. And you have to do this line together. It's Kol Hashem b'koach. It's Kol Hashem b'hadar. The voice of God is in power. The voice of God is in hadar. Now, I have majesty. I don't like that. I don't like that translation. What do you have for hadar here?
Power.
Power. No, the first one's power. What's the second? Hadar. Majesty. Okay. Hadar is beauty. Hadar is beauty. So God's voice is majestic and powerful. It's also sweet and beautiful. And this is a powerful and an important idea, I believe. Remember the story of Eliyahu Hanavi, that when he runs away after the famous episode in Har Carmel, he goes to Har Sinai. And Hashem isn't in the mighty sounds and the thunder and the lightning. Hashem is Kol Damama Daka, a still small voice. And that's what I think verse Dalet is referring to. Yes, God is the majestic voice of, over the Yam Suf and at Har Sinai. We're going to talk more about Har Sinai in a minute. But God's voice is also the sweet and beautiful voice, which was heard by Eliyahu Hanavi when he went back to Har Sinai. That's Hadar. Hadar. We use that word all, pre-Eitz Hadar, another reference to Tu B'Shvat, right? Okay, pre-Eitz Hadar, the beautiful fruit, which of course is, what's the beautiful fruit? Etrog. And one of the many mystical customs of Tu B'Shvat is, anyone know? The prayer of Tu B'Shvat is, God, give me a beautiful etrog this year. Remember, especially in Europe, and even in parts of Eretz Yisrael, it was hard to get etrogim. Today, that is not a big deal, Baruch Hashem. But so they would pray on Tu B'Shvat that when came Sukkot, they'd have a beautiful etrog. Pre-Eitz Hadar. Hadar means beautiful. Why is the etrog beautiful? Okay. I'm not saying they're ugly. There is ugly fruit. Why is the etrog beautiful?
Defined that way.
Okay, I can't disagree with that, because our sages define it that way. That's a terrific answer. Yeah. The smell is very beautiful. That people like the fragrance. The reason that's given by a number of commentaries is because the etrog is the only fruit left today. This is true of all the fruits in the Garden of Eden. That if you eat the fruit, let's say you make like tea out of the fruit. Don't just eat it. It's very sour. But if you eat the fruit, okay, or make jam out of the fruit, it has the same taste as the bark of the tree. The tree and the fruit have the same taste. If you took the bark of the tree and you boiled it in water, it would taste just like the fruit.
Wasn't the pre-Eitz Hadar supposed to be an etrog?
There is such an opinion. There are 11 opinions in the Gemara. Yeah, that's one of them. Apple is not one of them.
No.
The apple is not one of them. But okay, just one more thing about the etrog, because we're talking about it. The other thing that's cool about etrogim that I think is unique, every other fruit that we have when the growing season is over falls off the tree. Etrogim do not fall off the tree. Etrogim, yeah. They will grow from year to year. You may have to take some wood and buttress the branch. And that's where you get those Teimani etrogim. Did you ever go to the shuk? This year, Rivka saw them for the first time. We went to the shuk. Yeah, like football, right? Okay, amazing. So some of them are like small watermelons because they grew from year to year. I actually asked the seller at the shuk how long this one was on the tree. He said, I'm not sure, but I think 3 years. And that was about the size of a football. That was about the size of football. And he said 3 years to get that large. But the Yemenites, so that's Hadar. Hadar has this beautiful idea of being pleasant and nice and gorgeous. And that's true about God's voice. It's not just scary. It's also amazingly beautiful. Okay. Now we get to the references that led many people, by the way, including the Malbim, to believe that this was talking about a specific historical event that took place north of Israel. Because in the next 3 verses, we're going to have references to Lebanon and Syria. And these references to Lebanon and Syria, according to the Malbim and a lot of historical writers on the poem, are referencing a specific historical event. And the first one is Kol Hashem Shover Arazim, the voice of God, which was in this case perhaps in the earthquake, okay, or in the mountain slides, right? The tremendous noise. The noise alone was enough to break the mightiest of trees. Now, in Eretz Yisrael, when you talk about the mightiest of trees, they say the cedars of Arzei Lebanon, the cedars of Lebanon. They are the hardest, and the Beit HaMikdash was built by Shlomo HaMelech with cedars of Lebanon because they are so powerful and so strong. Someone was explaining to me why the wood in Eretz Yisrael, in other words, we grow trees here, but we don't produce any wood here. The wood is all imported, mostly from Yugoslavia and the former Yugoslavia, that area. And this guy was explaining to me that the winters here aren't harsh enough. That the wood, and this is true in the high mountains in Lebanon, they do have snow and they do have very bitter winters. It's the cold that like hardens the wood. And in Eretz Yisrael, we don't have harsh enough winters for the wood to get strong enough to be used for building. But okay, so Kol Hashem Shover Arazim, the voice of the sound. So one of the commentators looked at said, human voices. If you go to high C, right, can break like a glass. But the voice of God is powerful enough to shatter a tree. Okay? V'yishaber Hashem et harzei halevanon. The power of God can be seen in this event, perhaps, that shattered the cedars of Lebanon, which are a very majestic tree. I mean, we're impressed by it. So are the Lebanese. It's on their flag. Okay? On their flag, of course, is the famous cedar of Lebanon tree. Okay, let's see if we can get in one more pasuk. Here we go. V'yarkideim k'mo egel, and God's voice causes them, we don't know who the them is yet, we'll see in a second, causes them to dance like little goats. In other words, God's voice, again, let's think perhaps earthquake. I'm sorry? Not little goats, little cows, right, calves. Sorry. Causes them to prance around. I don't know. Maybe they do prance. But what were the things that dance like a prancing calf? Lebanon v'Sirion. The Lebanese mountains. The Lebanon means the mountain chain. Anybody know what the Sirion is? The Hermon. Very good. That was the ancient name for the Hermon. The ancient Lebanese, the Tzidonim, people from Sidon and Sur and Tyre, used to call that Sirion. That was the name for the Hermon. Very good. Okay? So these mountains were caused to dance. I mean, the earthquake or the rumbling or whatever it was so amazingly powerful, the mountains looked like they were bouncing around. Okay? And we believe that God's voice can cause this kind of cataclysmic behavior. Okay? And then it gives another metaphor. And this is a famous metaphor. We're going to see it again in other poems. Kimoven re'emim, like the children of the re'emim. What is the re'em? Anybody know? What is the re'em? King David refers to it. It's mentioned in the end of Devarim. I'm sorry? Now Rashi says it's a unicorn. Rashi says, based on a midrash, that it's a unicorn. So, in other words, since in the time, by the time of Chazal, there were no longer re'emim in Eretz Yisrael, they started to assume it was a mythical beast, but it wasn't. It was a real beast, and it was called an aurochs. A-U-R-O-C-S, aurochs. You can look it up, or you can see remains of them in the Israel Museum. The aurochs was this majestic, unbelievably beautiful wild ox. We believe that all bovines are descended from the aurochs. And the aurochs is before we domesticated, okay? The aurochs was the only wild kosher beast. I'm not sure anybody ever ate them, but they had the simanim and were theoretically kosher. But they were wild. Don't get near them. But what was most amazing about the re'emim? Their antlers or their horns, the karnei re'emim. Think like Texas Longhorns, right? That these were, they were majestic and huge, which is why the expression karnei re'em is used at the end of Sefer Devarim to describe the glory of the tribe of Joseph. Okay? Because they were so glorious. The last aurochs was apparently killed in the middle of the 1300s in Poland. But no, they existed throughout Europe and the Middle East. They were out of here by the time of Chazal, a couple of hundred BCE. They were no longer in this area. But in the time of Tanakh, in the time of David HaMelech, they were here. Just want to say, how does he translate it? Sirion, right. He makes Lebanon dance like a calf and Sirion like a wild ox. So he translates a wild ox. But if you can look up, you can go to Google and whatever. It was just a majestic beast. And it was probably, we didn't have naturally elephants here. So this was probably the largest land animal here in Eretz Yisrael. So it was, very, very majestic and therefore affected the poetry of Tanakh a lot, especially David HaMelech, but Moshe Rabbeinu too. So so it comes up a lot. And so think of Paul Bunyan and his blue ox Babe, So this was like the blue ox of, Babe from, please.
What about the rhinoceros? That's one horn.
This didn't have one horn. This did not have one. This had two. This had two that coming out from both sides of the head. Yeah. Rhinoceros, I don't believe, was known here in Eretz Yisrael. Hippopotamus was. Yeah, but I don't think we knew from... you have to remember that the Hula Valley used to be a swamp. We know that there were water buffalo there, and I believe that there were at one time hippopotamuses there as well. Yeah, but that we're talking a long time ago now. Okay, so we're gonna stop at this point. And we're gonna get into some more historical references, and then Be'ezrat Hashem we will wrap up the poem next time. Everyone should have a wonderful week, and everyone should have a joyous Tu B'Shvat. A joyous Tu B'Shvat.
I just wanted, as a student of linguistics,